Well, we're getting our sea legs on for a trip down a river, which in the local tongue means the Crocodile River. And guess what? There are crocodiles here, but there's lots of other things too. This is that motmot that we saw a little bit earlier, but this time we've got a little bit more daylight, and so those colors come out a little bit better. Still nothing really good on the wing, however. Once again, we have an appearance now by the basilisk. That's the lizard that can actually run on water. And this, of course, is the Pacific variety. It's not the bright green that we saw in the Caribbean. It's more of a grayish color. Now, this is what we've been looking for. That's the tail. Right there's the tail of a really big crocodile. He's about 16 feet. Now in this river they will get up to about 20 feet, but this particular one is the ruler of this particular stretch of the river. Next we see a really brave or foolish basilisk. You can see him right there, and he's not terribly far away from a fairly large cousin. Costa Rica abolished its military in about 1948, I think. And the result is when the brown pelican, as you see here, is referred to as the Costa Rican Air Force, it's something of a joke. This ends our time in Costa Rica, and we're going to go up to Guatemala next and take a look at Maya ruins. Welcome to Yasha. Yasha is a Mayan word. Actually, it's a Spanish transliteration of a Mayan word, meaning green water, and that refers to the lakes that are around this particular area. Yasha is a fairly young excavation. Not that it has been discovered only recently, but it is still being excavated, and large amounts of it are not known. The largest structure, the one that's clearly most prominent and most well developed here at Yasha, is Building 216. And we're on Building 216 right now. Building 216 is the temple that you saw in the lead into this particular segment. But most of Yasha looks more like what you see here. That is, it's still very much being dug out of the earth. And this was also true of Tikal at one time. The monuments had originally been covered over with stucco, but over a period of time the stucco wore off, and the dirt piled up over it, and the jungle came in over these things, and everything has to be removed. It's difficult to imagine how much debris had to be removed until you come here to Yasha. Take a look at these tree roots, for example. They were basically tearing the stone apart. Death to all who enter here. Actually, of course, I can't read Maya glyphics, so I have no idea what this says. The fact of the matter is, when I was in college, almost no one could read any of the Mayan glyphics. Nowadays we can read about 60%. This is the glyphic for cocoa. The glyphic on the top is the ka for the cocoa, and the two little circles in front of it indicate that you say the ka twice. Then the glyphic down below is wa, and that's how you get cocoa, at least in Mayan. One of the Mayan nobles at Tikal has an interesting name. He's called Lord Chocolate, or in Mayan, Coco. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? That has been fantastic. Now we know what various dynasties have done, and we know all kinds of things that we couldn't have known just a couple of decades ago. One of the things that we know is that Dos Pilas was a colony of Tikal. Now, the reason why we know that is because there was a hurricane, and the hurricane blew away some vegetation, and the result of that was that it exposed some Mayan glyphs that hadn't been seen before and hadn't been read. It tells us a long story. It tells us that in the 600s there was a young nobleman, a young boy from Tikal that was sent with his family to Dos Pilas. Now eventually he becomes the king of Dos Pilas. And back in those days there were two superpowers. One was Tikal and the other was Calakmul. And they were fighting back and forth all the time, and because Dos Pilas was a colony of Tikal, obviously it fought on the side of Tikal. Well, Calakmul defeated Dos Pilas, and the king that I was telling you about ran back into the jungle. And eventually he came to some kind of an understanding with Calakmul. He came back into the city and he became a vassal of the king of Calakmul. And then of course he switched sides and he attacked Tikal. And Dos Pilas and Calakmul and all of their allies eventually defeated Tikal. And we know all of this because of the staircase that I told you about. We know that the king of Dos Pilas and the king of Calakmul had a party as a result. Now, so that you don't feel too bad about Tikal, Tikal comes roaring back from this defeat, and it eventually destroys its enemies. Tikal becomes one of the great cities of the Mayan kingdom. This is temple number 1 in Tikal. This is the one where the jade mask was found in the burial. And that jade mask is now in the Archaeological Museum in Guatemala City. Archaeologists say that Tikal was founded around 900, although the inscriptions at Tikal indicate that their history went back to about 1100 BC. By 700 AD, Tikal was the #1 city in the Mayan world, with a population estimated between 1 and 200,000. At the same time, the city of Rome had a population of only about 50,000. The city center is very complex and covers miles, as you can see on this map. So how did Tikal get to be so important? Well, it goes back to the events of 378 AD. That's the last year of Jaguar Paw, the king. Tikal had an alliance with Teotihuacan up in Mexico, and Teotihuacan brought in new advanced high-tech weaponry. Teotihuacan sent down a general by the name of Fireborn, and he introduced Tikal to the addle-addle, or spear thrower, which allows you to throw a spear with much greater force than normal. This was brand new technology to the Maya. On the day that Fireborn got to Tikal, he launched a coup, and Jaguar Paul was executed, and he was replaced by one of the sons of the king of Teotihuacan. And Tikal did well until Teotihuacan's power began to fade, and that's when Calakmul began to become its major rival. The last inscription at Tikal is dated 869 AD. Welcome to Tikal. When I was in college studying Mayan history, there wasn't very much known. The fact of the matter is that we didn't have knowledge of most of the glyphs, and so the result is that we didn't know the history of what actually happened here. What we did know was that most of these sites have an astronomical or astrological, at least, implication to them. And the result is that many archaeologists concluded that these places were inhabited by peaceful astronomers. Well, now that we can read the text, we know that they weren't peaceful. Tikal fought many wars. And the fact of the matter is, many of these wars, because of the astrological connection, are frequently referred to now as the Star Wars. Oh, incidentally, Star Wars was partially shot here. Let's take a fast trip up to the top of temple number 4, the tallest temple, the one that's over 200 feet tall. This is the classic view from the top of Temple 4 of the city of Tikal. You've almost certainly seen it many times, and it should look somewhat familiar to you. I've been told that this is the only place where the Mayan temples rise above the jungle below.